Good afternoon, everyone. We were all there Saturday night in Times Square when 3 innocent people were shot senselessly. While there is no joy today, there is justice. Several hours ago in Florida, and Chief Essick will detail the details, the shooter in the incident was apprehended and will be eventually returned to face justice in New York City. Saturday evening, after leaving Times Square, I went to Bellevue Hospital, to the pediatric emergency room. And there I spoke to the young girl's father, as the father and mother were consoling the child about to enter surgery. At the time, I had the opportunity to speak to the father, to tell him that we were sorry and we would do everything within our power to get justice for his little girl. Well, today we fulfilled that promise, and I knew we would fulfill that promise because of the work of the greatest detectives in the world. Chief Essick is now going to detail how the apprehension went about.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Good. With me today is Chief Hank Sortner, the commanding officer of Manhattan South Detectives, and Mike Kletzel, the commanding officer of the Fugitive Task Force. Also with me is Lieutenant Mario Nicholas from the Midtown South Detective Squad, who led the investigation. Earlier today, members of the United States Marshal's Office apprehended Farrakhan Muhammad in a McDonald's parking lot in Stark, Florida, just outside of Jacksonville. Mr. Muhammad was with a female who we believed to be his girlfriend, and he was taken into custody without incident. Before I get into more details, I'd like to thank our partners in law enforcement, particularly members of the U.S. Marshal's Office, for their help. I also want to thank Hank Sortner's people, Manhattan South Detective personnel, and homicide detectives for their work. You can only imagine. It's a daytime shooting, Times Square, thousands of hours of video canvassing to be viewed, witnesses to be interviewed. The eyes of the world were on them. They were watching. And here we are, 4 days later, with an apprehension, an identification of the perpetrator made a few hours after this horrific incident. Truly a great job by the New York City police detectives. In particular, I want to point out 2 sharp-eyed sergeants, Sergeants Monaco and Essick, who at a later homicide investigation nearby that night spotted the intended target based on clothing match and facial similarities, and that intended target was able to be interviewed. Also, P.O. Latimer, who was formerly assigned to the Times Square detail, who viewed the picture of Mr. Muhammad and was instrumental in the ID of the suspect. I'd also like to thank Mike Kletzel and his people in Warrants, particularly Timmy Sinque, the lead investigator in Warrants, and the Fugitive Task Force, who never cease to amaze me in apprehending some of the world's most violent perpetrators. Finally, I want to thank the public for all your help. We received numerous Crime Stoppers tips that are instrumental in the identification, and it shows how much Crime Stoppers is valuable and the need for the police department's help in your matters. So shortly after the shooting that took place on May 8th, detectives from Midtown South developed information and identification as to the shooter, a Mr. Farrakhan Muhammad, a male 31 years old. Through leads from the public via Crime Stoppers tips and other investigative measures, we were able to determine that Mr. Muhammad was traveling out of state and heading south. This was confirmed by video surveillance obtained in Fayetteville, North Carolina, with a positive sighting. Investigators also developed information of a few possible addresses in Florida. Working with our partners in the Fugitive Task Force, we located him at 802 South Walnut Street, a McDonald's parking lot. We believe a woman who was his girlfriend was driving the auto. Mr. Muhammad was taken into custody without incident. He is presently located in the custody of the Stark Police Department, and the investigation is continuing. On another note, my detectives visited our 4-year-old victim yesterday, and she, along with the 2 other unintended victims, are expected to make a full recovery.